The courtroom lights glared down, cold and clinical, but the tension was anything but sterile. All eyes locked on Judge Britt Grant as she leaned forward, her tone sharp, her words carrying the weight of authority. She wasn't asking a question, she was setting a trap. Each syllable dripped with condescension, designed not to seek truth but to corner Jasmine Crockett into a stumble. The silence that followed was suffocating. Viewers watching could feel the imbalance of power. A federal judge wielding her position like a weapon, expecting the Congresswoman to falter. It was the kind of moment that had humiliated others before. A public spectacle of intimidation. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't blinking. She raised her eyes, calm but unyielding, and let the weight of that pause linger. A raised eyebrow, a measured breath. She turned the silence into her own stage. The trap was set. The room expected hesitation. The cameras expected a crack. Even her critics leaned forward, hungry for a misstep. The exchange wasn't just about one question, it was about something much bigger. The theme running through the courtroom was clear. Justice, accountability, and who truly holds the power to define the truth. Judge Britt Grant, cloaked in the authority of her robe, represented the entrenched hierarchy of a system where authority is often mistaken for wisdom. Her words carried the weight of tradition, but beneath them was a familiar arrogance, the expectation that power alone would silence opposition. For Jasmine Crockett, this was not merely a debate over legal nuance. It was a test of dignity, of intellect, and of her right to stand on equal footing against an old guard that had dismissed voices like hers for decades. Each carefully framed question was less about law and more about domination, and each calm, brilliant response from Crockett transformed the exchange into a battle of values. Arrogance versus authenticity, intimidation versus intellect. The stakes stretched far beyond the courtroom walls. This wasn't just Crockett versus Grant. It was every underdog facing the smirk of authority. It was every voice told to know its place. And as Crockett's responses grew sharper, the imbalance began to tilt. The audience, in the room and across the country, could feel it. The tension wasn't confined to wood-paneled walls. Social media feeds lit up. Clips circulated in real time. Hashtags began bubbling. This wasn't simply a legal exchange. It was about to explode into a national conversation on justice, resilience, and the power of intellect over intimidation. FOMO trigger. The clash didn't stay confined to the courtroom. It was about to explode across the nation. To understand why this moment carried such weight, you have to look at who Judge Britt Grant has always been. Polished, pedigreed, and long celebrated within elite conservative circles, her rise through the judiciary was framed as inevitable. On paper, her credentials gleamed, but just beneath that shine, critics pointed to a pattern, moments of detachment, tone-deaf rulings, and a habit of treating challengers not as equals, but as inconveniences. To her supporters, she was sharp and unwavering. To her opponents, she embodied an arrogance that flowed not from brilliance, but from insulation, a life lived with the assurance that authority would always protect her, from accountability. In that courtroom, Judge Grant wasn't just a jurist, she was the face of the old guard, untouchable, unshaken, and dismissive of any voice daring to puncture the bubble of elitism. Every clipped question, every narrowed glance carried the weight of someone used to winning by posture alone. She didn't just expect answers, she expected submission. Jasmine Crockett's story could not be more different from Britt Grant's. Where Grant's path was paved with privilege, Crockett's was carved through grit. She didn't inherit power, she earned every ounce of it. Raised far from the marble halls of Washington, her rise was not handed to her, it was fought for. With long nights, endless study, and the resilience of someone who knew the rules weren't made for her to win. As an attorney, Crockett built a reputation as a fighter for the overlooked, the kind of lawyer who didn't just speak for her clients, but spoke with the fire of someone who had walked through struggle herself. She became known for her sharp wit, her ability to turn condescension into comedy, and her talent for dismantling opponents with nothing but clarity and truth. Every obstacle only sharpened her voice. By the time she entered politics, Crockett was already a force, unapologetically authentic, unbothered by elitism, and ready to disrupt the spaces that had long dismissed people like her. She wasn't polished for the cameras. She was real, and that realness made her powerful. In that courtroom moment with Judge Grant, she wasn't just another attorney facing a judge's trap. She was the embodiment of every underdog who had ever been underestimated. And unlike so many before her, she was ready, prepared not only to defend herself, but to turn the trap into a triumph. The tension in the courtroom began to sharpen, every word slicing through the air like a blade. Judge Britt Grant leaned forward, her tone colder, her questions more pointed. She raised her voice just enough to project authority, a calculated tactic meant to overwhelm, to corner, to remind everyone who held the gavel. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her posture remained calm, her hands steady, her eyes locked on Grant with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through storms far greater than this. With each question, Grant fired. Crockett countered with precision, her words crisp, deliberate, each one cutting away at the false authority Grant tried to cloak herself in. The room itself seemed to shift. Lawyers shifted in their chairs, journalists leaned in, the silence before each response hanging heavy, as though everyone was waiting for the storm to break. Every exchange grew more personal, more charged, as if generations of tension between power and resistance had found their stage in this single room. The air was tense, the kind of stillness that happens just before lightning splits the sky. Judge Britt Grant had laid her final trap, a loaded question framed to corner Jasmine Crockett, to force her into either contradiction or silence. It was the kind of judicial maneuver that had silenced countless lawyers before. But Jasmine Crockett was not like the others. She paused deliberately. The silence stretched long enough for onlookers to shift in their seats, for Grant's smug expression to grow ever so slightly. And then Crockett leaned in, her voice steady, clear, unshaken. "Your Honor, with all due respect," she began, each word like the tightening of a drum, "what you've just suggested doesn't align with the Constitution you swore to uphold." Social media clips of the exchange began appearing online in real time, captions flashing across screens. Crockett schooling the judge. "When brilliance shuts down arrogance, mic drop moment of the year." Comments poured in, emojis of fire and applause flooding timelines. And then came the final blow. Crockett, her voice calm but cutting, delivered the line that would echo far beyond the courtroom. Justice isn't about who can shout the loudest or twist the rules the sharpest. It's about truth. And truth doesn't answer to intimidation. The courtroom erupted. Murmurs, applause, gasps. Even her critics online couldn't deny it. The moment was electric, unforgettable. Grant sat back in her chair, her face frozen in a silence far louder than words. She had tried to trap Crockett, but it was she who ended up ensnared, left speechless, diminished before the very audience she sought to command. Crockett didn't gloat. She simply gathered her notes, her expression calm, as though she had only done what needed to be done. The moment Jasmine Crockett's words hit the air, they didn't just stay inside the courtroom, they exploded outward like a shockwave. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. On Twitter, hashtags began trending. Dark Crockett clapback, Nungler truth over traps, and speechless judge. Users replayed the moment on loop, some adding slow motion to the exact instant Britt Grant's confidence cracked. Memes flooded timelines. Grant depicted as a chess player checkmated by Crockett, or captions reading, "When you think you set the trap, but you're the one who gets caught." Prominent voices joined the chorus. Civil rights activists praised Crockett's poise. Legal analysts called her counterattack a masterclass in courtroom brilliance. Even late-night comedians couldn't resist, joking about how rare it was to see a judge left without words. On Twitter, hashtags began trending. Dark Crockett clapback, Nungler truth over traps, and speechless judge. Users replayed the moment on loop, some adding slow motion to the exact instant Britt Grant's confidence cracked. Memes flooded timelines. Grant depicted as a chess player checkmated by Crockett, or captions reading, "When you think you set the trap, but you're the one who gets caught." Celebrities weighed in too, retweeting her mic drop line with comments like, "This is leadership and protect this woman at all costs." On Instagram and TikTok, clips of the exchange racked up millions of views, the comment sections overflowing with fire emojis, applause, and declarations like, "She said what we've all been waiting for." For Britt Grant, the fallout was brutal. Headlines highlighted her humiliation, op-eds dissected her arrogance, and conservative pundits scrambled to spin the narrative. But it was too late. When the dust settled, it became clear Jasmine Crockett's triumph wasn't just about a viral moment or a courtroom exchange. It was about something deeper, a clash of values. Judge Britt Grant had tried to turn the proceeding into a trap, a display of power meant to intimidate, but Crockett reframed the entire confrontation. She proved that in the end, it isn't about titles or robes. It's about truth, courage, and dignity. Her brilliance carried a universal lesson. Arrogance and manipulation can dominate for a moment, but they never last. What endures is authenticity, the kind that speaks plainly, stands firm, and refuses to bow. For viewers, it was more than entertainment. It was validation, a reminder that justice doesn't belong only to the powerful or the privileged. It belongs to those willing to stand up and speak with clarity, even when the odds seem stacked. Crockett didn't just counter a judge, she countered a mindset that too often silences and dismisses. Crockett's stand left people empowered, not just proud of her, but inspired to believe that they, too, could speak truth to power. Because every time someone like her steps into the fire and refuses to be burned, it lights a path for everyone watching. Judge Britt Grant thought she had the upper hand. She tried to corner Jasmine Crockett with sharp questions and a calculated trap. But in the end, it was Crockett's brilliance that turned the tables, leaving even a federal judge speechless. That's the truth-revealing moment. The lesson is undeniable. Power without integrity always falters, but authenticity endures. Crockett's composure and clarity didn't just win the moment. They set an example for how dignity dismantles manipulation. And here's where you come in. Don't let this story stop here. Share it, talk about it. Subscribe for more. Stand with dignity the same way Jasmine Crockett did. Because every time someone like her holds their ground, it's not just a victory in a courtroom. It's a victory for all of us who believe in fairness and truth.